On this week's program, Moldvey Inc. can feel the breeze between his ears. Eric Diaz is about as sharp as a goblin spear on old world economics. Night Danger promotes animal abuse against players who post memes. Mythic Mountain appears to have a brand new indie game all about truck drivers in mind. And an old school gamer fulfills a prophecy in the saddest way possible. That's right, folks, you have found your way to Driving and Dragons. I'm Daniel, and this is Intelligence is a Dump Stat. While you are here, hit the like and hype buttons. Share this video with the folks who might get a laugh out of it. Comment below and subscribe to the channel. These are free and are one of the single best things that you can do to help the channel continue to grow. You may notice I work on cars in the background. Here's the fun thing. This channel has a mission to give away cars to members of the TTRPG community that you nominate who may be in need of a blessing. There is currently a 1974 V8 Dodge Dart sitting in New York, waiting to get fixed up for one of you guys. Why is it in New York? Well, because shipping a car that needs to be restored is not cheap, and nor is restoring a car. And that's where you guys come in. Every super thanks, every super chat, every Patreon pledge, every channel membership on this channel goes into the bucket that is set aside to fund the project. If you guys can share the channel to the point that I hit 1,000 subs, then the YouTube ad revenue will also land in that bucket. I suppose you could also, lobby the fine folks over at Prestige Consumer Healthcare, because I think BC Headache Powder sponsorship is probably in order at this point. So make one small click for this channel and one giant leap for one of your buddies in the comments who gets a car one day. That's the fun stuff out of the way. Let's get to the painful part. Dumb shit people said on the internet. We start over on the X page of one Moldvey Inc. Now, old Moldvey is definitely someone you should follow. His musings on old school D&D are generally insightful and often humorous, but that doesn't mean that he isn't an imbecile. Seriously, he strays into Tolkien territory with one of the largest point-missing pieces of bad advice that has recently cropped up on the old interwebs. Fantasy worlds should be like Bree. Humans and hobbits living together with only the occasional dwarf or magic users traveling by, and no elves. And while there certainly should be the occasional Bree-like town in your world, in what drug-fueled world of binging stupidity does this in any way equate to an entire world? First is the easy part, no elves. Unless your elves are like Tolkien's elves in that they are semi-divine immortal beings that A, are very few in number by the time Bree is founded, and B, have deliberately separated themselves from the rest of the world as their time has come to an end and their association with other peoples has almost never gone well, then there's no reason for elves to show up, or to not show up in the more cosmopolitan areas such as towns and major travel lanes. And as for the rest, it doesn't even really fit into an original D&D style campaign, let alone the high fantasy, high magic worlds of post-1980 D&D. The entire concept is a gross overcorrection of the idiotic Watsy children of the world D&D vision. But that's not why Moldvey is here. It is his use of the town of Bree. Bree is a backwater frontier town in the all-but-empty wilderness between the Shire and Rivendell. The elves have no reason to stop there on their travels to the Grey Havens. Dwarves have no reasons to travel west in general, and the rest of Middle-earth, even in the Third Age, operates more like a classic fantasy world. You do have, maybe not as much cosmopolitanism, but you do have other races and stuff that are not necessarily uncommon to be seen in the eastern part of the world, in Gondor and up in the, with the Men of Dale and Lonely Mountain and whatnot. Using Bree as an example of Tolkien giving you the perfect common fantasy village that all your villages in your game should look like is like saying that a modern game should have all the towns be like a Route 66 holdover in the middle of the Arizona desert. Eric Diaz makes his return to Intelligence as a dump stat following a somewhat lengthy hiatus. You had a good run of good sense there, Eric, but it was bound to fail eventually. For fans of a game with deep roots in math, D&D players sure struggle with economics. I guess it isn't really the math that catches them out, as much as it's the common sense or the basic research part. See, Eric tried, but the BX economy just doesn't make sense to him. Spears are worth their weight in silver, and bows are worth their weight in gold. The logistics just don't work in transporting something like copper. Just haul spears everywhere. Now, the idea that the game's economy functions like a real-world economy is kind of silly on its face. It's an abstraction just like everything else, and the long and short of it is that an actual medieval economy wouldn't be anything like a thing in the D&D world for the same reasons that a combat wheelchair is stupid. Magic kind of changes everything. Hell, even in a low magic world, the speed of communication and the reduced need for methods to purify water or preserve food are kind of game changers. At first level, a party hitting a dungeon and pulling a sack full of gold they'd be walking out with enough to buy a small neighborhood in a classic medieval economy. I mean, we're just going to clear the real world stuff out of here real quick. If a party finds 50 gold in a dungeon, 50 gold nobles is roughly 17 pounds sterling in medieval England. A skilled craftsman might earn 5 or 6 pounds in a year. A common laborer makes less than half of that. So if we math it out, a small village of, say, 150 people, like, I don't know, the village of Hamlet, would probably have around 50 homes in it. A common medieval cottage costs about 2 pounds, which is about a year's work for a commoner. Your little goblin hidey hole dive would have gotten you enough money to buy more than 10% of the real estate in Hamlet in an afternoon. So no, nothing in the D&D economy makes much sense. But let's set aside that little suspension of disbelief and just focus on a little bit of common sense here. First off, let's use that 50 gold above. At 3 silver apiece for your spears, you'd need 165 goblin spears to get your cash out. And this, of course, assumes that they're good quality blacksmith spears and not just pointy, crooked stick junk. Oh, but what about the bows? A longbow's worth 3 gold. So now we need 17 fine quality longbows in the hut with the goblins who are barely tall enough to use short bows, of which you would need 20. Weight aside, and the fact that this would be extraordinarily unwieldy aside, hell, even the how did your level 1 party wipe out an entire warband of goblins aside, just think simple supply and demand. You got enough spears to arm the entire village with extras and enough bows for a third of the population here. At what point have your adventurers flooded the pointy stick market to the point that spears are worthless? This is the idiocy of trying to video game your D&D. This isn't Final Fantasy, where the shop will just fork over the equivalent of 3 years' pay for an endless supply of pointed sticks. And that's to say nothing of the difference between carrying 50 coins in a somewhat heavy sack to hauling around 165 8 to 10 foot ashwood poles. How about this? Quit trying to find ways to use numbers in the rulebook to circumvent basic logic and recognize the abstractions for what they are. And credit to Redcaps for pointing out that this spear-based economy is functionally retarded. Night Danger is with us once again with some brilliant Bro SR stupidity. He starts out by mocking memes, which follow the boo-hoo, my players did XYZ and ruined the game format. And that's fine. A lot of those are kind of stupid, and they basically amount to a game master either failing to adapt or allowing something they shouldn't. But then he bros it up. This is, of course, all about joyless, short-sighted game masters who are abusing their players. By complaining when those players do stupid things that only make sense when they're operating on a meta level to cause chaos within the game. Things that are mechanically, I guess, work, but don't make sense in a real-world setting. So, old Night Danger suggests that he is now working with Sarah McLachlan and the ASPCA to rehome these players at loving Bro SR tables. Which is about like saying I'm taking the dog from a guy who was upset at shit on the carpet and rehoming it with Michael Vick. Not to be outdone, Dungeoneer and Mythic Mountain Folk Tabletop teamed up to bring more low IQ bro blathering to the fine folks of X. Dungeoneer had a player show up with a character who was in love with a hooker who died early on, and Dungeoneer thought it would be just awesome if every new character was a different guy simping for the same ye olde OnlyFans girl. You see, this is what you get when your entire gaming community is basically a bunch of Beavis and Buttheads rolling dice and never scoring. Mythic hops in to repost this along with the comment, actual world building. Sure. If your game is lot lizards and long hauls and you're trying to build up the lore of the part of the TA parking lot where the streetlights went out, this is Bro SR world building, folks. A prostitute who has regulars that have adventures in the old storage shed out back. Like I said, it's Beavis and Butthead at every table with the 40-year-old virgin pretending to see boobs and describing them as a bag of wet sand. Winning secrets, folks. Last but not least, we return to Old School Gamer. There's just too much stuff said backed by too little intelligence here to get into all the details, folks. This guy is like Condor DM on LSD with fewer redeeming qualities and an even sadder life. We pick on Condor, but he does have some decent gaming opinions, and while she is no longer in the picture, he did have an actual girlfriend at one point in his life. But Old School Gamer, Lord above, this dude just keeps getting worse. Last week I mentioned that he would most certainly end up being one of those IAADS alumni who has a meltdown over his inclusion on the list, and for the first time in his life, he didn't disappoint. He took to X to cry about me before heading to Rumble to show the entire world a triple threat of pathetic failures. He starts a stream on Gold for XP and talks for 50 minutes with his microphone off. And he missed that his microphone was off because he had exactly 0 live viewers to comment and let him know he couldn't be heard. Once he gets the stream going, you get to hear him speak on Gold for XP and prove to the world that he has absolutely no idea how it works, and doubles down on the stuff that landed him here last week. But it even gets worse. Way worse. This dude went live with his AI girlfriend as a co-host, and I am not shitting you. He had an anime AI e-girl program that was apparently prompted to agree with him and to praise his insight regardless of his complete lack of anything resembling consistency and logic, acting as his co-host, and he actually put this out on video for the world to see as if it were something he should brag about. I do believe that he has since deleted all of it except for a short 12-minute clip where he was crying about how mean I was to him. But who knows, maybe it's still there if you dig enough. He also bombarded X with multiple versions of the same Substack article complaining about TTRPG influencers. But I'll save you the read. Smash your head 6 or 7 times with a cast iron skillet, dump a box of alphabet cereal on the floor, and you will end up experiencing more coherent thoughts. This guy is a loon bat, folks. Anyway, that's what I've got for now. BC Headache Powder, here I come. Now make with the sponsorship money. Or, at least get me a free supply of the white stuff. See you next time.